I've been sitting on this for a while, and with circumstances being what they are, I guess it's better late than never. So welcome back to another Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled video, where here I'll be covering all the bonus tracks that came and went with each Grand Prix season, ranking them all and how they held up for me personally. I have a strong feeling this list will vary for many people, and I'm probably going to say the wrong thing to pretty much everyone watching this. I'm going to be throwing my hat into the ring and give off my 2 cents on each track we've gotten over the last year of this game's life cycle. There's a good chance you may not agree with my list, and if so, that's fine. If you're going to comment your own list and ranking for these Grand Prix tracks, please be civil, as I am not looking to start any flame wars. And for the sake of this list, no, Retro Stadium doesn't count. Because while it is considered a bonus track on the PlayStation 4, it's really nothing more than a glorified reskin of Turbo Track, and we all know how good a track that is. That said, onto my list for the Grand Prix tracks in Crash Team Racing. Starting off the list is perhaps the bonus track that is the most nerve-wracking for me to play personally, Nina's Nightmare, introduced in the Spooky Grand Prix. The track is laid out to be set in the twisted mind of Nina herself, including slimy trails, pumpkin spiders, and a mansion befitting the likeness of Madame Amberly. At first glance, this doesn't look all that bad, and they seem to have gone all out with the horror aspect of the track, but this is really where my praises for Nina's Nightmare ends. I don't know what it is with this track. It could be the inclusion of the blue fire pads, but I feel this track is too short for its own good. It's got a nice build up outside the track, but once you head inside and make this incredibly awkward turn around the mansion, you've basically seen everything the map has to offer. Furthermore, this track is now home to perhaps the most annoying aspect of the Grand Prix it came from. The gimmick being you have to catch ghosts for the sake of collecting them and clearing challenges. You don't really gain anything special from it, just track them down and that's that. Combine its lackluster design with such wonky collision, this spider that can potentially screw you over on a bad day playing with others, and this fucking fence jump that kills my speed at the drop of a hat, not helping that this jump feels the most inconsistent out of all of them, and you have not only my worst bonus track out of all of them, but also one of the few tracks in the game that I do not look forward to anytime it pops up. Seriously, if I had a nickel for every time this fence jump ruined my run... Calculator error. Next on the list takes us all the way back to the very first Grand Prix. Man, where's the time gone? Twilight Tour from the first ever Nitro Tour Grand Prix. This track is built after the Egyptian Arabian levels from Crash 3. You start off at night cruising through the pyramids, enter the tomb that lies within, and by day you're sliding and hopping all over the town bazaar. It's a really neat concept that makes for a pretty fun ride. The only reason it's ranked much lower is because after a while you start to realize that the track doesn't really show all that much. And while that's fine in its own right, I mean this is their first rodeo creating new original tracks, it still leaves you wishing there was more to see. At most, we do have this genie carrying boxes that flies by once in a while, and that can really screw you over when you least expect it. But while it's all well built, Twilight Tour still leaves something to be desired. Not to mention, having played this for as long as I have, I'm not that big a fan of this track's music either, but that's relatively minor compared to everything else I explained. Luckily, after this one, the track design started to get much better over time. Case in point, this next track that looks really great, but I feel they could have done a whole lot more with it. Koala Carnival from the Neon Circus Grand Prix. Just as the name indicates, this track takes us through a wild spectacle through the circus tent, mostly consisting of soaring through the air and making giant jumps with the ramps built all over. Like I said, this track looks gorgeous, perhaps one of the best looking bonus tracks personally. I especially love going through the neon lit tunnel, that's always a highlight. But once the reality sinks in and you're basically going in a giant oval, that hardly leaves much room for the imagination. This is a track I consider a mixed bag of sorts. Overly great design, overly simplistic layout. Though, funnily enough, I don't really see myself judging this track as harshly as everyone else around me. It's a fine enough track if you're in the mood for a quick game or just want to kill some time with friends and whatnot. This may stem from the fact that I'm one of those players who enjoys a nice and easy track once in a while, though unlike Nina's Nightmare, I feel like the length of this track is fitting for its layout, and that's considering the fact that this track is Blue Fire enabled. I don't know, it's not really that great a track, but at the same time I don't necessarily hate it all that much. I can take what I can get out of it, but because of its limitations I can't rank it any higher than here. Next is a track that's more interesting to play on, though I find it a bit complex at times. Here we have Gingerbread Joyride from the holiday-themed Winter Festival Grand Prix. This track takes us through a candy-coated wonderland, complete with candy canes, bouncing jellies, and giant jello squares because why not? Now on to why I feel this track is more complicated for me personally. It could be the track layout, it could be my poor lines on this track, but I find it pretty hard to keep my fire going through this track. To make matters worse, there's this shortcut that you have to jump over at the right time to hop over the gate going into the snowfield. Though here I feel as though if I miss it, which half the time I do, it's personally my fault because more often than not I undershot it or I just barely make it, but end up losing my reserves anyway going into it. If it's not this, then it's definitely the big jellos near the finish line that bother me. Hit them just once and you're done. Needless to say, this makes playing this track a bit nerve-wracking if you don't get your lines just right. It's a good thing I've played this long enough to know my surroundings or this would have been much lower than this number 5 spot. It's a good time all things considered, just not particularly my speed, and I'm not talking driving styles. Now for a high-speed track that actually makes me want to improve myself. Drive Through Danger, the final track from the Gas Maxia Grand Prix. This track takes us on Oxide's home turf, in the midst of an interplanetary war between two fast food chains. This concept alone is very promising, and what we got in the end is perhaps the most advanced track in the history of Crash Team Racing. You need to have a good idea of how reserve management works, how to U-turn and keep good lines. This is the track where in order to obtain the best time possible, you need to be an absolute god. With this in mind, I was initially worried this track was going to be the death of me with all of its turns and corners. And all frustrations here and there aside, multiple plays of this track seem to put those fears to rest over time. Even when I'm using speed, my go-to engine at all times. I feel I've got a consistently good idea of how this track works. That's not to say I'm entirely perfect playing on this track, I'm still slipping up and falling off the course once in a while, but knowing that I'm still determined to try my hardest on a track like this speaks volumes to how effectively solid it is in the long run. That's how you know you've got something good going on. All in all, this was great stuff for a finale track, and I'm confident they ended on a good note with this one. Now, my top 3 picks in this list were the hardest for me to determine personally, so I gave it some thought and had to be completely honest with myself for the next bonus tracks coming up. Starting with this one at number 3, Prehistoric Playground from the Back in Time Grand Prix. The story behind this one is pretty wild. Fake Crash is messing with Entropy's time-traveling spiel, and this is the end result. A world full of goofy-looking dinosaurs and native Fake Crash clones galore. It's dumb, but I love it all the same. Now, initially, this would have been my top favorite bonus track earlier on, and don't get me wrong, I still enjoy breezing through it to this day. Generally because I feel of all the tracks I've played, I've always felt this was one of the easiest to maintain Blue Fire on for as long as I've played it, and by the time this first release, already I considered it an improvement over Twilight Tour. Add this with the notion that this track released around the month of my birthday, and you can imagine how psyched I was once I learned to master this one. At least until I took this to time trial, and it's here that I realized the one thing that always tends to slow me down. As expected, it's always the ending spiral near the finish line. Getting your lines just right on this thing is an absolute killer, not gonna lie here. Once you take this bump in the road out of the equation, we got a track that I definitely wouldn't mind coming back to on the occasion. This next one is bound to put me on thin ice, but as it stands, here goes the Spyro Circuit from the aptly named Spyro and Friends Grand Prix. As a Spyro person myself, I'll tell you right now that this track heavily takes inspiration from the first game in the trilogy, if the dragon statues all throughout wasn't any indication. We got the scenic artisan world, going into Dark Hollow's library, transitioning into magic crafters, going through high caves and the insides of Wizard Peak. I like to think of this track as a more relaxed hyperspace way, and if I were to choose between the two, I'd probably take this over the latter. It is a bit restricting in the sense that if you so much as touch the grass, that counts as going off course. After having played this for as long as I have though, it really becomes nothing more than a simple annoyance. The real concerning factor I thought was gonna be the wizards that slow you down if you cross their path. And they're still the low point of this map for sure. Once I got my lines figured out, I can always get past them without having to worry myself about them anymore. And those firework boxes on the track, I don't even pay any mind to them. It could be because this is the bonus track I've played the most in regular player and time trial. And the more I played through it, the more I found myself enjoying it with every run. Even getting past my bias for the little dragon. What we have here is a pretty serviceable track in Spyro's favor. And thanks to my developer time run against Matthew R, learning some new lines and strategies are definitely what helped make this track even more of a fun ride for myself. So I guess I know who to thank for that. I'd call this my home turf for sure, especially anytime I'm playing this track with Spyro himself. But as for the best bonus track in my book, oh no, we're getting to that right as we speak. So at this point, my vote for the personal best bonus track goes to none other than the track that managed to surprise me the most with every playthrough. That honor goes to Megamix Mania, direct from the Rustland Grand Prix. This track can be best summed up as, let's take ruse tubes, suck all the water and life out of it, turn it into an apocalyptic wasteland, and to finish it all off, we'll have Engine's Battleship direct from Twinsanity with Rusty Walrus labeled all over it. This is all incredible stuff, and at first glance, I was worried thinking I wouldn't like this one so much, but over time, I really found myself looking forward to this one anytime it comes up. It could be the amazing and over-the-top track design. It could be that the track itself is challenging but doable. It could be the fact that the music for this track really helps to set the mood and pump me up for a drive. The fan blades are by far the most concerning factor, but with the right timing, they're not really that much of an issue for me. The landmines are too much though, and the only time I'd ever run into these things is if I'm not paying attention or if my lining is off. Even then, this is one of those tracks where I really want to give it my best all the way through. Solid track design, decent layout, the right amount of challenge and skill, all these make for the ideal ingredients for a grade A track in my personal opinion. This is why if I were to pick out any of the 8 bonus tracks as the best, I would choose Megamix Mania, hands down. So that's how I'd rank all the bonus tracks in Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. What did you think of this list? Do you agree or disagree with my selections? Leave your thoughts below and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching everybody. Peace.